Welcome back. So there was a question a few weeks ago in a comment that if it is possible to create in Panda3D procedurally generated meshes or programmatically generating meshes. And yes, it is possible. So I'm just going to show you in this video how to do that. So I just already prepared a basic Panda application. So here in the MyGame class, which inherits from the show base, and in the init method of the MyGame, I'm also calling the super or the show bases init method and setting the background color to 0.1, 0.1 and 0.1, and this is the alpha, which is set to 1. And here I'm also creating an orthographic lens, setting the film size of this lens to 1280 by 720, setting the near and the far clipping plane for this lens to near is -50 and the far plane is 50. And I'm also setting here the camera's position to 0, 0, 0 and setting on the camera node set lens to this lens. So in order to actually generate procedural meshes, we will need some imports, and I'm just going to paste them here. So the first import will be from Panda3D core, import the geometry vertex format or the geom vertex format, then the geom vertex data or the geometry vertex data, also the transparency attribute or the transparency attribute, and also from the Panda3D core import the geom or the geometry, the geom triangles or the geometry triangles, and the geom vertex writer or the geometry vertex writer. We will need all of this. And the second thing will be, I'm just going to create a global, or so in the module scope I'm just going to create a function which will create actually a colored rectangle. So instead of typing it out, I'm just going to copy and paste parts of the code from my second monitor. And this is the create colored rectangle function. And it takes 5 arguments: the x, z, the width and the height. So the x and the z position, the width and the height, and the colors. The first thing we are going to do in this function is create a format, for that we are going to use the geom vertex format that get v3c4. v3c4 means vertex 3 and color 4. And if you are using PyCharm, you can middle click on this geometry vertex format. So this is a class which inherits from this, and you will find all of these get v3c4, all of these, what it returns. So let me see. It is a fairly large class, and here it starts. So here is just a get v3. This is just for vertices, when you have just vertices like x, y, z coordinates. Here is the get v3c4 we are using, v3c4. So this is for returns standard vertex format with a 4 components color. So vertex 3 and color 4. Here is a get v3c4 t2, which is vertex 3, color 4 and texture 2. So 2 coordinates for the texture, so UV coordinates. Also there is the get v3 and cp. This is the returns standard vertex format with a packed color in a 3 component vertex position. This is the get v3 cp2 t2, or here is the get v3 and n3. So this is the vertex 3 and normal 3. This is the vertex 3, normal 3 and also color 4. This is vertex 3, normal 3, color 4 and texture 2, so texture UV coordinates. So you can just take a look on the source code and just read through these doc strings, which one of these methods what does. So I'm using here the getV3C4 because I just need a 3 components vector and 4 components colors. And here I'm creating a vData using the geometry vertex data, giving it a name of square, giving it the format we created here, and also the geometry.UHD dynamic. So there is also static drawing, but I'm just going to use the dynamic. And so we used here the geometry vertex format, the geometry vertex data, and also this geometry from these imports. So the next thing will be to actually create the vertices and the colors. So vertex will be equal to geom vertex writer or geometry vertex writer, giving it as a first argument the vData and also the name vertex. And this has to be the same name, so vertex, color, or I don't know, texture, so text chord or normal. So here I'm creating also a color using the geometry vertex writer, so giving it also the vData and specifying here that we are going to create a color. And now let's add data to this vertex, and we can do that by calling on a vertex that add data method and add data 3, so we are going to add x, y, and z, so 3 datas. And x will be the x, the y will be 0 because these will be just flat planes, and the z will be the z, so xz. So this will be the first vertex. The second vertex will be the x plus the width, y 0, and the z. And this is the third vertex, which is x plus the width 0 and z plus the height. And the fourth vertex, which is x 0 and z plus the height. So this will form a square. So a square has, or a plane has 4 vertices. And this will be the lower left, this will be the lower right, this will be the upper right, yes, and this will be the upper left corner of the plane. So now let's add the colors. So here I'm just going to copy another code which will be an if. So the colors here in the create color direct starts with 0, so colors with none, so colors equals none. And if the user doesn't specify this, it will be defaulted to call these colors. And so if the colors is specified, I'm also asking here if the length of the color is less than 4, then I'm going to set it to pure white. Otherwise, if this is not true, I'm just going to add using the colors that add data 4. So here we use the add data 3 because we have XYZ coordinates, but here by the colors we have 4 values, so red, green, blue, and alpha. So that's why we are using here the add data 4F, 4 floats. And these colors ranges from 0 to 1. That's why we are using here floats. So, as I said, if the color is none, if we didn't specify here the color, it will be default to these colors. So color point add data, so color is this one. Color point add data, red, green, blue. Add another data, red, green, blue, and alpha, the third and the fourth color. So now we have to actually create the indices. So we are going to create trees or the triangles using the geom triangles. So we imported here from the Panda3D core. So we are going to specify that the triangles or this data is a dynamic data, using the geometry.UHD dynamic. Here we are adding the vertices. So this is the first triangle. 0, 1 and 2. So this is the lower left, lower right and the upper right corner. And then we are adding these in OpenGL you call these indices or index drawing. So these are the indices. So we are adding the second triangle using the trees that add vertices, and this is the upper right vertice, the upper left vertice and the lower left vertice. So we are creating two triangles, and these two triangles will form a plane. And lastly, in this function, we're just going to create a square using the geometry or the geom class and giving it the v data or the vertex data we created it here. And also for the square that add primitive, we are going to add the trees primitive or the triangles primitive we created here and just return the square. So of course this code will be uploaded to GitHub and the link to this will be in the description. So and you can also just go to the Panda3D's documentation, although you won't find any good explanation how does it work. I just also tried out some of the examples. And now let's create the first square or the first plane here in the myGameInit method. I'm going to create a square 1 using the create colored rectangle in the position 0, 0, so this is the XZ position, and the width and the height will be 200 and 200. And we also need to create I'm just going to create a geometry node here. So G node equals geometry node. I have to import these also. So from the Panda3D core, so Panda3D core, import the geometry node. So let's create a geometry node. It will be called square. And to this geometry node, I'm just going to create a plane. So it's I know it's complicated. So I'm just going to create a plane notepad. So this is a geometry node, and this is a notepad. So we can create it by self.render.attach new node and giving it the geometry node, and it will return a new node path. And now we can just I think, or yes, it's automatically attached to the renderer. I thought that I have to attach it to the renderer, so but here we already attached using the render that attach new node, so we don't need this. And lastly, we have to just append the square to this geometry node. So we can do this by calling on the G node the add geometry method and giving it the square 1. And now we should see a colored square. So because we didn't specify here the color, it automatically uses these colors in the create colored rect function. But let me create one more of these or two more of these squares. So square 2, create colored rectangle in the position 350, 100, the size is 200 and 200, so with height, and here its color will be red, green, blue and alpha, so the blue, full blue, and the third square will be in the position negative 640, negative 360, its width and height also 200 and 200, and its color will be red, green, blue, so the green. And we also have to add this to the geometry node. So geometry node that add geometry square 1, geometry node that add geometry square 2, geometry that add geometry square 3. And now we should have here in the lower left is this one, red green is this one, and in the here in the upper right is this one, so the blue one. And in the middle of the screen, so remember that the 0, 0 coordinates is in the center of the screen. So we are added this to 0, 0 and 200, 200. So from this point of this rectangle, it goes 200 width and 200 in height. And I'm just also going to add one more, which will create a textured rectangle. So after the create colored rectangle, I'm just going to paste a second function. This will be the create textured rectangle. And everything is almost the same, but now the format is, so we use the get v3c4 or vertex 3 and color 4, but in the create texture direct we are using the get v3t2, so vertex 3 texture 2. Here we are also creating vertex data using the geometry vertex data, calling it sphere, giving it the format, and also the geometry that UHD dynamic, so for dynamic drawing. If you want to know more about what is the static drawing and what is the dynamic drawing, I just go to Google and search for OpenGL dynamic draw versus static draw. Here are the vertices, so vertex equal geometry vertex writer or geom vertex writer, giving the v data and the vertex, and the texture chords will be the geometry vertex writer, v data and text chord. So this has to be the name of text chord. It cannot be like texture or something like that, because I tried it and it didn't work. So it has to be text chord. And I went to the documentation and I find nothing about this. So what we can give to this vertex geometry vertex writer. So Panda's documentation is still lacks of some. It is very, messy, and it misses many parts of the Panda. Okay, so here I am adding the vertex that add data. The vertices, so the first vertex, the second vertex, third and the fourth vertex. So it will be also just a rectangle or a plane which has 4 vertices. Here I am adding the texture coordinates, so texture chords that add data to f, so 2 floats, which is u and v. So the first UV, the second UV, third and the fourth UV coordinates. Here I'm also generating a triangle, and so this is for index drawing, so the first triangle and the second triangle. The square is equal to geometry data and giving it the v data or the vertex data. Here square that add primitive triangles. So the same as this was, but now we are using vertex 3 texture 2. So to actually draw a textured rectangle, here I'm just going to create a geometry node. First I'm just going to create here. Okay, here a textured rectangle, let's call it texture direct, using the create texture direct in the position negative 320 on x, 0 on the z, and its width and height 200 and 200. And now we should also create a geometry node. So here I'm just going to, before I create the textured rectangle, I'm going to create a geometry node 2. So this was the G node and this is the G node 2. Geometry node and square 2. And to this geometry node I'm just going to append the textured rectangle. But we also need some kind of a texture, and I'm just going to quickly off-screen copy some texture. So here in the assets folder, under the images folder, I copied this playership.png file. I created this a few years ago in Inkscape. I'm just going to use this as a texture for this textured rectangle. So we added the geometry to the geometry node, the textured rectangle, and now what we need is actually load the texture itself. So let's load the texture. It is in the assets folder. So assets / images / playership.png. And also I'm just going to create a ship notepad, ship called ship, using the self.rendered attach new node, and attach the geometry node we created here. And to this geometry node is already added the geometry called textured rect, which was returned by this function. It's very starts to be very complicated, so I don't think someone should use this functionality, but okay, if someone wants to use, then why not? Okay, so the next thing will be to actually set on this notepad, using the set texture method, the texture we loaded here. And you don't have to use the usual way when we say, let's say in the previous code, we use the self.eject the reparent to the self.renderer, because when we here calling the renderer attach new node, it does the same, and attaching it here the geometry node, and here renderer attach new node g02, we are doing technically the same. And now let me see. And now, as you can see, we have this textured rectangle with this spaceship. But to actually, as you can see now, it has this background. To actually, this is a PNG file, so to actually don't show this alpha channel, you can just set on the ship notepad using the set transparency, the transparency attribute to M alpha. And now this black square is gone. And also I didn't like that this is a little bit stretched. So because it is a perfect square. So here I'm just going to make leave the width at 200, but make the height, let's say 300. It's a little bit too much, so let be it 280. So, okay, you get the idea. So this is how you can create simple plane geometries. Probably you can also generate some much more complicated geometries with these methods, but I don't know, I don't recommend that, because it's much more easier just to use a modeling program like Blender or Maya or 3ds Max, and this is, for me at least, it's too complicated.